All right, folks. Welcome in to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at Bet Online and number 38. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I am here talking about, man, oh man, what a horrible loss last night for the Denver Nuggets as they dropped that one 115-70. I obviously couldn't podcast last night. How many people could actually podcast last night and share those views? I mean, this was a disgusting performance in general, but the more I think about it, the more I think it's a little bit less unexpected than people realize. The Wolves were going to be desperate. The Nuggets had just won 3 games in a row. It's really hard to win 4 games in a row in the playoffs, and it gets really hard to win 4 games in a row in the regular season. So the more I think about it, the more I understand why it happened, but the degree to which it actually happened was not fantastic. We'll talk about it all. We will make sure to go through all of the layers, all of the details, everything that needs to be said, everything that needs to be discussed, including we'll talk about Jamal Murray's struggles. We'll talk about Michael Porter, who has not so secretly been pretty bad in this series. And we will go over a variety of other things as well. Should be maybe not fun, but I think necessary for covering this game. But first, I got to tell everybody about Bet Online, the number one source for the latest odds and bets this summer with MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff options. All you got to do, go and find the latest stats, news, and scores available and follow your favorite teams. Head over to their website, use your mobile device to get in on the action, get the latest odds and lines, and everything in between. Bet Online, where the game starts. All right, let's talk about last night. Let's talk about what happened. This was a gross performance in a variety of ways, but it didn't start off that way. It did not start that way, and I think if you're a Nuggets fan, you probably felt pretty good heading into the first time out where Denver goes on a 9-2 run out in the first 3 minutes of the game. The Wolves couldn't hit anything. The Nuggets were not necessarily hitting outside shots that often, but they were doing pretty well. Michael Porter hit a 3, turned out to be his only 3 of the game. Nikola Jokic hit a couple baskets, and things were looking good. And then the Wolves rattle off a 20-0 run, and that doesn't help matters. It really doesn't. Denver was stuck on 9 points. There were times where they were stuck on, I think, 33 points. They were stuck on 63 points throughout this game. And there were so many prolonged stretches in this one where Denver just could not score. They couldn't do anything at all. And the fact that they let go of the rope in that way, not really, I guess I'm not surprised because Denver's done this before in this series against this team in the Timberwolves, where game 2, it wasn't quite like game 2. This was more about Denver just missing shots. Like, Minnesota played great defense, don't get me wrong, but Denver still generated some good shots, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the more and more I think about it, it was just like Denver let these poor shooting moments, they let these poor opportunities work against them. And they allowed runouts on points in transition. They allowed points off of turnovers. It was not a great performance for obvious reasons. Denver had only 3 total points on 6 Minnesota turnovers. The Wolves had 19 points off of 12 Denver turnovers. And the Nuggets just didn't get anything easy. And so they're stuck in the half court for the entire time, trying to figure out how to operate. And rather than get Jokic into the post on a consistent basis, the Nuggets had to stay very perimeter oriented because the Wolves were doubling Nikola Jokic constantly. And he was subpar. I'm not going to sit here and say that he was great. He was the only Nugget that was anything close to subpar. Everybody else, I think, was horrible. And the Wolves sensed that. They knew that. They understood that that was how it's going to be. And they doubled Jokic incessantly, forced other players to beat them. And not only did those players not beat the Timberwolves, they actively hurt Denver in a lot of ways, including Jamal, including Michael Porter, but also the bench. And we'll talk about the bench a little bit later, too. And yet, through all of that, Denver nearly worked their way back near halftime. There was a sense, there was a moment where, okay, the Wolves had gone up by like 25, 26, 27 points. And then the Nuggets worked it down to 21. And then right before the half, they got a stop and they were down 17 points. And Aaron Gordon grabs a contested rebound with 15 seconds left to go or something, and tries to throw the ball the length of the floor to Jamal Murray, but gets disrupted, turns it over, and the Wolves score on the ensuing possession after an offensive rebound heading into halftime. So it could have been a 14 or 15-point game, and instead it was a 19-point game. And I really feel like right at that half, that was where the momentum was killed. That was where the Nuggets knew that they were not going to win this game. It was 19-point margin, and that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. It's not fun. It's like you never want to hear that as a Nuggets fan, but that's just how I think it was. And then Denver came out in the second half, never really recovered. It was a 19-point deficit. They tried fighting a little bit, but they just couldn't score. It turned into a 25-point deficit. And then out of the fourth quarter, Jokic stayed on the floor. It didn't matter. Denver couldn't score anyway. It went down to a 30-point deficit, and then they pulled the plug. And then the bench came in and was even worse, like just so much bad, so bad. And this game got up to a 50-point margin. 50 points. I don't think I've ever seen that from the Nuggets before. Like even in the regular season, at least keep it respectable at 40. But like the Nuggets were so bad and so off kilter, and the Wolves were playing really well on both ends of the floor that they pushed that margin up to 50 points. Ultimately, it settled on 45, which was statistically, by point margin, the worst playoff loss in Denver Nuggets franchise history. Not great. Not how you want it to go. And just being at the bar last night, number 38, we had a great time. We did a nice pregame podcast, and things were going pretty well. The vibes were high. And fans even stuck around for this 45-point margin, and it was just horrible to witness in person, because Nuggets fans, I think, were very excited about last night. They wanted to see whether Denver could get it done on the road, and the opposite happened. Denver collapsed. They did not play with poise. They turned the ball over, and even if they didn't turn the ball over, the shots that they generated inside the arc were horrible. They were contested. They were off balance, off kilter, often a lot of fadeaways, a lot of floaters, nothing all the way to the rim. And that involved Denver settling for threes a ton. And you got to give a lot of credit to Rudy Gobert on this. He got clowned a lot in Game 5. A lot. And for him to come back and play the way that he played defensively, I think it's really impressive. I honestly do. And the Nuggets just could not get anything around the rim for the sole reason that Rudy Gobert was lurking. And Jamal Murray had the worst time of it. I'm going to talk about him a little bit more extended in the second segment, but he was completely flummoxed by the rim protection. He was very tentative. He didn't know when to go up versus when not to go up. Christian Brown got into the lane several times, just had no idea what to do. And Nikola Jokic, he shot over Gobert and did a reasonable job. Maybe not his most efficient performance, but still shot 9 of 19. But on a night where Jokic was subpar and Jamal Murray was horrible, it just was never going to happen for Denver. And everybody else was horrible, but you can't really expect, and I'm going to hammer this point home going forward, the stars are the ones that have to play well on the road. You have to get great star production, because the role players, you're not expecting them to shine in road games. That's just not how the NBA works. They need momentum. They need good coaching. They need the crowd behind them. You can feel and sense the momentum and just in a place of comfort at home. And that's just not what was going to happen in game 6. So Denver needed Jokic, Murray, and to a lesser extent Porter to really show up in this one. And they're like 0.5 out of 3 in terms of who showed up. Jokic, I think, was kind of there. But Murray and Porter, it's really bad. Denver as a whole, they shot 7 out of 36 from 3. On open or wide open threes, according to NBA.com, they were 6 out of 31. So they generally shot a ton of open shots when they're out on the perimeter. The Wolves dared them on several possessions. Like, they closed out hard, but that was the shot that they were willing to live with. They were not going to let Murray get going in the middle of the lane. They're not going to let Jokic get going in the middle of the lane. They were going to force those guys to kick it out. And Denver just did not make them pay. And so that's going to be a pivot point in game 7. Can Denver hit their open shots? Or if they don't, can they at least limit Minnesota from hitting their open shots? Because Minnesota, they hit as many as they needed to. And it wasn't this crazy offensive performance from them, but it was pretty, it was a pretty strong opportunity that they had. And they just could not get it done. So, yeah, just a really tough thing. Okay, True Teller, if you continue to spam, if you post the same message over and over again, I will put you in timeout. At least have a different message. Look, 31 open or wide open threes. If you're not going to make those, or at least a consistent number of those, then you're not going to get it done. That wasn't the reason that Denver lost, but you need everybody in these moments. And it's why when you're facing a great team like Minnesota, it's just going to be difficult. Denver's going to have to work for it. They're going to have to play better. And they went the opposite direction after what was an okay game 5. It was a masterful performance from Jokic in game 5, but nobody else really did well. And then it's just tough. It's tough to expect everybody to step up in game 6. And there was just a lot of perimeter attacking, not a lot of paint aggression, not a lot of playing with force. Murray obviously is the main culprit there. He was pretty bad the entire night. But it was everybody, frankly. Like Denver could not get anything going towards the rim. And there's just a lot to be concerned about heading into game 7. So when we come back, we're going to talk about Murray a little bit more extendedly. We're going to talk about Porter a little bit more extendedly. And then I'm going to give some credit to Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert. We'll be right back. But first, as I mentioned earlier, number 38 has done a great job hosting Mile High Sports and Denver Stiffs for watch parties, for pregame podcasts. The vibes in the place were incredible. We were outside last night. The weather was so good. And they've got this massive stage and this open green area and just a really great opportunity to hang out, be with friends. And it sucked that it happened for game 6, but they're going to do another watch party for game 7. If you're open on Sunday, if you're looking for a great place to hang, number 38 is your place to go. Make sure to go check it out. It's in Rhino. You're going to want to get there early. Parking's not perfect, but you're going to want to find a way to stop by at number 38 because the atmosphere is incredible. So should be a lot of fun. Everybody, we will be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. There we go. We're back. Pickaxe and Roll, Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you are on the audio side of things, make sure to go check that out. Make sure to what am I saying? Leave a rating and review. That would be great as I continue to put out content both for the video and the audio audiences. I would love for some positive ratings and reviews to come in, especially at this time where I don't have to podcast at this. Like, I mean, it's just actually I do. I definitely do. But it's going to be tough. Going to be interesting to see how Denver bounces back. So leaving a positive rating and review would be great. Okay, we got to talk about Jamal. Got to talk about Jamal Murray. In this game, Denver scored 70 points, and the primary culprit for that was Jamal. 10 points on 4 of 18 from the field, 2 of 7 from 3, 0 of 0 from the line. He has not attempted more than 3 free throws in any one game, and this is his third time in the series that he's attempted 0 free throws. 10 points, 5 assists, 2 turnovers, 4 of 18 from the field. And it was just the way that it unfolded that was really tough. He started, I think, 1 of 11 from the field. I think it was 2 of 13 at one point. Ultimately finishes 4 of 18. He got a couple threes to go in the second half, but like it was ugly for a long time. And the most important factor in his struggles is the fact that he just cannot get separation. He cannot move. And it's whether it's the calf, he hurt the elbow, like that's what he was talking about last night. I think that seems like a pretty paltry excuse. Whether it was like just the amazing perimeter defense that the T-Wolves are playing. Like they do have 2 of the best perimeter defenders in the league in Nikola Alexander-Walker and Jaden McDaniels. Those guys were unbelievable. And the other factor is that Anthony Edwards is taking on the assignment of guarding Jamal Murray with the starters so that Jaden McDaniels can guard Michael Porter. And that factor has really stymied Porter. When the opposing team has 2 elite perimeter defenders with length and athleticism, with great hands, with physicality, it makes it really difficult. And Edwards is not at the same level that those 2 are, but he has moments where he can absolutely dominate as a defender. And the fact that Murray can't make that coverage pay, I think is a really big issue. Now, there are some clips that are going around. I shared some. I think Stefan No posted some. That a lot of the defense that the Wolves are playing at this point is they are shrinking the floor. They are putting as many bodies in front of the Murray-Jokic pick and roll as possible, and then they are closing out the shooters that are not necessarily super comfortable. So whether that's Aaron Gordon, whether that's Christian Brown, they'll live with a KCP 3. Even Michael Porter at times, they will sag off of him and they'll give half help on him, basically. Not give him a empty lane or anything like that. But oftentimes when Murray is coming off of the screen, like if it's Ant behind him or Jaden McDaniels or Nickeil Alexander-Walker, those guys are so good at getting around screens on the ball that there's not a lot of space. And then you've got Rudy Gobert roaming off of Aaron Gordon. You've got Karl Anthony Towns in your face. And then you've also got other guys kind of sagging off of the wings and off of the corners. And so the driving lanes and the maneuverability are just not there. And if Murray was a little bit healthier, it might be a little bit better. But I honestly don't think it would be that much better because the Wolves are an elite defense. And Murray, this is just a matchup that he was always going to struggle with. And I do think, to give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt on the physicality and the athleticism aspect of it, Denver's played on again, off again since game 3. And when they went down 0-2, they had a little bit of time to recover. Murray looked better out of game 3. And then he's looked steadily worse ever since then. Game 3, he was at his best. Game 4, he was good. Game 5, he was meh, mostly bad, or subpar. And then game 6, he was awful. Denver's got a couple days now. They've got Friday will be an entire off day today. Saturday, they will practice. And then Sunday, they'll play. Maybe he could get some rest a little bit and try to figure some stuff out. But more importantly than that, he's just got to play better. It cannot be about how tired you are. It cannot be about how physically like worn down you are. It cannot be about the calf. It cannot be about the lower body injuries. Like this is the moment that Murray is supposed to be the star for. This is the opportunity. This is where big game players are made of. And not playing well in game 6, like it set Denver back, to be clear, in that game. Even if he had played well, it's very possible that they would not have won. But I do think that game 7, he's just got to show up. Like this cannot be a thing. He's a star. And if you want to be a star, you've got to show up in the big moments, especially at home, especially if for the entire playoffs you've been extremely up and down to the point where like it's been mostly down with him. And so he's really struggled with the way that the Wolves have guarded him, whether it's in the pick and roll, whether it's in the DHO. There have been a couple times where he's isolated, but he's isolating Rudy Gobert. And Rudy Gobert is one of the best isolation bigs that you could possibly have for a team. And so often in those moments, Murray's settling for a contested long fall away 2, which he can make. But the fact that he's settling for that is a really bad sign. So I'm at this point, I don't know what version of Murray they're going to get physically in game 7. I have to imagine it'll be better than what they got in game 6. But at this point, it's got to be about accepting the challenge and being better. Right now, he is at a 45% true shooting on the playoffs, which is about as bad as it could possibly be. And that is an issue. That's obviously an issue. And Denver needs him to be at his best in these moments. And he has shown up in especially in back against the wall kind of moments. He played really well in game 3. Game 5, he came off of the sore calf and had 32 points on 28 shots, including the season or the series winner against the Lakers. Down 3-1, game 7 against the Clippers, he had 40 points. Game 7 against the Jazz, he was horrible. But in order to get there, he had 50 points, 42 points, and 50 points in consecutive games. So I am going to look, I'm a Murray guy. Everybody knows this. I'm not going to make a prediction for how he's going to do because I just don't know. I want to think the best of what is going to be, what's going to happen, because I've seen him show up in these moments. I've seen him rise above the pressure, rise above the pain, and play really well in these moments. Could this be too much to overcome? Absolutely. And if that's the case, you're going to need other guys to step up because Denver can get a bad Murray game and still win game 7. They did that in game 5. Now it took a masterclass from Jokic, but it's not like anybody else really played that well in game 5. You could get a good Porter game. You could get another good Aaron Gordon game. Aaron Gordon played well. I will say that. KCP shot really well. The bench, not necessarily, they were okay. Justin Holiday wasn't good, but Reggie Jackson was solid. Christian Brown was pretty good in game 5. But that's a normal kind of up and down. What really is going to have to happen for Denver in game 7, maybe I should save this for segment 3, is their defense is just going to have to be better in the half court. And that might involve benching Porter. Game 6, Porter was just as bad as Murray in different ways. Murray had some bad moments on the defensive end, but Porter's entire game on defense was bad. And his process and his decision-making on offense was bad too. Murray's obviously compromised from a physical perspective. I'm not sure what Porter's dealing with. Right now he's dealing with Jaden McDaniels disease. But even when it's not Jaden McDaniels, he's getting ripped by Kyle Anderson. Kyle Anderson's got great hands, but Porter has to know that by now. They've played 6 games against each other. But the defense with Porter has been horrible. in these last 3 games in a row. It is why Denver closed with Christian Brown in games 4 and 5. Christian Brown earned those minutes. There's no doubt about it. But Porter, I think, aided that decision for Michael Malone really easily. In this past game, game 6, shot 3 of 9 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3. The only 3 that he hit, I think, was the first one that he attempted, or at least it was an early one. I don't remember if it was the first. Had a block, but he only had 5 defensive rebounds and was just not helpful in a lot of those possessions. And he was often the guy that when I'm thinking about where the rotations are sort of breaking down, it's with Porter. Jaden McDaniels was his primary matchup for most of the night. And Jaden McDaniels went off. 21 points, 8 of 10, 3 of 5 from 3. The Nuggets dared him to shoot oftentimes, and I bet that was a directive to Porter. They're like, if you have to help, then help, and we'll let Jaden McDaniels beat us. And Jaden McDaniels beat Denver. He beat them like real good. Jaden McDaniels made a lot of plays, but there were a lot of guys in Minnesota that made a lot of plays, including Anthony Edwards, including Mike Conley, who came back. And I thought the offense for Minnesota obviously looked better with Conley out there. But look, like Denver can't have these defensive breakdowns with their starting group. Their starting group has been bad, frankly, for much of this series. And the reason why is because Minnesota's starting lineup is designed to give Denver starters hell. So I'm not surprised that this is happening. What is surprising is the degree to which the Nuggets are wilting, and they're playing kind of soft. And Porter, I think, is at the center of that. Porter has not played with the physicality, with the intensity, and with the definitiveness that you need from somebody in his position. Where, yeah, Murray's had a tough time. Porter does not need to have such a tough time as he has had. Like, I can understand it with Murray with the physicality that he's constantly dealing with, how often the Timberwolves are over rotating towards him, and like he's got to deal with navigating Rudy Gobert, like on top of all of the perimeter defense that he's figuring out. And it's tough. It's a tough place for him to be. With Porter, his job is not as difficult. It just isn't. And yet he has played a pretty consistently poor game over the course of these past 3. Now, like with Murray, you can turn that around in game 7. You'll be at home. You'll be in a situation where, yes, the pressure will be high, but you've been in pressure situations before, and Porter's played pretty reasonably in those pressure situations before. So I consider him like he'll be able to step up. He should absolutely be able to step up. Whether he does, we'll see. Final thing for this segment, the bench. The bench regressed in a major, major way. 0 bench points in the first 3 quarters. And a lot of that was on some missed threes, but also Reggie Jackson attacking the rim, not doing so hot. Christian Brown attacking the rim, not doing so hot. Those guys really struggled. Justin Holiday was asked to hit some high-pressure threes, high-leverage threes. They didn't go down. He went 0 for 3, then 0 of 5 from the field. The starters are the ones that are going to put Denver in position to win or lose a game like this. And they were, like, I'm just listing the plus minuses here, minus 27, minus 28, minus 25, minus 32, minus 24. This game was not on the bench. There's no doubt about it. Game 7 comes around, the bench is going to have to be better. They're going to have to show up in some way, shape, or form. One guy's going to have to step up. Maybe it's Christian Brown. Maybe it's Justin Holiday. Maybe it's Reggie Jackson. Maybe it's a mystery candidate. Who knows? But the bench got thoroughly outplayed by the Minnesota bench in this one. And just can't happen. Like, Denver's going to need a better version of that in game 7. We'll see whether they can. When we come back, we are going to chat about game 7 and some initial thoughts. I'm going to probably do another podcast on it with Swipa. We'll probably do that either Saturday or early Sunday, depending on when the game starts. But we're going to see what ultimately happens with it. We'll be right back, but first, pickaxe and roll. Hey, Nuggets fans, Ryan Blackburn here, host of the Pickaxe and Roll podcast on Mile High Sports. We've got the best Denver Nuggets coverage around, so make sure not to miss an episode and subscribe down below to the Mile High Sports YouTube channel. Nuggets off to a great start. Make sure not to miss a thing on Mile High Sports. All right, we're back. Pickaxe and Roll, Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel. That would be tremendous as we continue to grow the podcast. I am going to share my screen here if I can do that real quick. Let's pull this up. This is being shared. Let's go to this. There we go. Miksuk, who great reporter for ESPN, doing a great job. He put together a nice little list from ESPN Stats and Info. Denver's the fifth team in NBA history to lose Game 6 by 30 plus. Prior to a Game 7, 3 of the prior 4 teams rebounded to win Game 7 per ESPN Stats. If you look at those previous matchups, Denver's loss, obviously the biggest that it could possibly be, but 1996 conference finals between the Supersonics, they ultimately won that and then advanced to the NBA finals. They lost Game 6, won Game 7. The Supersonics again lost Game 6 and then lost Game 7 in 1978. But that was in the NBA finals, so kind of not surprising in that regard. 2018 first round Cavs, that was against the Indiana Pacers, I believe. That was a LeBron James team where LeBron just decided, okay, I'm good. I'm going to play really hard in Game 7. And they ultimately figured that out. LeBron was the best player on the floor against the Pacers that year. Bojan Bogdanovic was tasked with guarding him that time. It's a pretty tough, tall order. And then the 1992 conference semis for the Cavs. Interesting that the Supersonics and the Cavs are the only two other franchises that have done this. They ultimately got it done. So I put that up here with the prospect of the series is not over. Despite the fact that it might feel like it's over, the series is not over. The Nuggets are in a tough spot, and they're going to have to bounce back. And the good thing is that they've got a couple days off. They've got a couple days to rest, recover, figure out what the heck happened, understand what they have to do in Game 7, and then psych themselves up for playing. I think they're capable of doing that. And we've seen them with their backs against the wall before. And I've already been punished once for counting this team out when they were down 0-2. They came back. They won 3 games in a row. And like I said at the beginning of this podcast, it can be hard to win 4 games in a row against any team. And the T-Wolves, many thought that they might collapse in that moment. But the fact that they didn't, I think shows, they've got some spine. They've got some backbone. They were not going to be embarrassed on their home floor and lose in front of their home fans in the manner that they did. And so they showed up. They showed up in a big way, and Denver didn't for Game 6. Denver was played on again, off again, on again, off again, and then on again for several games now. And Game 4, or no, this was the 4th game in a row where they basically played every other day. And so I'm not surprised that they did not have the best performance. I'm not. Now, I could not be surprised, and then also, Denver could absolutely lose in Game 7, because that's the door that you open up for yourselves by losing Game 6. Denver could have had an opportunity to close the door, to not give Minnesota any opportunity in a Game 7 opportunity, but that's not what's happening. They're going to have to play hard. They're going to have to play well. Game 7 initial thoughts here. Both teams are mostly out of adjustments. The Wolves have done everything that they can to put Denver into a tough position. The Nuggets have done everything that they can. there's a couple of different matchup things that they might decide to do. There's a couple of different players off the bench that they might play instead of whether it's Michael Porter or Jamal Murray at times or KCP at times or Aaron Gordon. It's very possible that they decide, hey, we will try to mix up some lineups a little bit differently. But for the most part, Denver's got their 8 guys. Peyton Watson has not been in this series, and I don't expect anybody else off the bench to be a major factor. The Wolves also, I don't expect anybody to be a major factor for them. They've decided they're going to go back to Kyle Anderson. Fine with them. Naz Reid is available. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is obviously a major factor for them as a perimeter defender. And those are basically the 3 guys that they're going to count on. They're not going to count on Monte Morris in a Game 7, I don't think. So mostly these 2 teams are going to play an 8-man rotation against each other. Maybe it even gets down to 7. And one of Justin Holiday or Reggie Jackson gets their minutes cut a little bit. I think Christian Brown has firmly established himself as the primary defender for Anthony Edwards when he's out there. So he'll probably play. But it wouldn't surprise me if Justin Holiday plays 5 minutes. Reggie Jackson plays 5 minutes. And then Nikola Jokic plays 46 to 48. And that's the adjustment that the Nuggets play. Is that they are just going to play Joker the entire game. I don't think that they can do that with Jamal. Maybe he will be okay physically by that point, and he'll be able to play a little bit better after a couple days rest. But I'm not expecting that much of a change. I'm expecting a minor change, not expecting a major change. And it's just going to be about, it's simply breaking it down to, it's going to be about who plays better, who shoots better, where the 3-point variance is going to go, who can make more hustle plays. It looks like Minnesota's been able to do that, certainly in Game 6, but Games 3, 4, and 5, the Nuggets made the hustle plays. And that was what gave them the advantage in a lot of these moments. They drew charges, they forced turnovers, they ran in fast breaks, they did everything that they could to limit the opposing team at the paint. True Teller asks, Ryan, why don't they hunt Mike Conley on switches like they did in regular season? Part of it is because it's really difficult, and the T-Wolves have done a fantastic job throughout this series of avoiding that switch, where whether it's McDaniels or Edwards or Nickeil Alexander-Walker, they are really hard to screen. They are really hard to force a switch off of. And so if it's Mike Conley, Denver should be trying to fight that. But the problem that you run into when you try to hunt those switches for too long is that the shot clock just runs. It just drops and goes from 10 to 7 to 4, and you're suddenly out of time because you're too busy focusing on, hey, maybe we could get Mike Conley on a switch. When in reality, Mike Conley's a pretty solid defender. He's just shorter. So that's the big reason. It's going to be about who makes the hustle plays. And it's also going to be about who generates the easiest shots at the rim and at the free throw line. The T-Wolves shot 24 free throws in this past game. The Nuggets shot 14. They couldn't draw any contact. Part of that is because you're playing on the road. Part of that is because the Timberwolves were the more aggressive and the physical team. And so they were ready for that. And I think the refs kind of rewarded them for being that physical version of themselves. I don't think that there were any bad calls really made. I don't think that the refs were a big deal in Game 6. We'll see if they're a big deal in Game 7. I don't know. That could be a factor. We just got 2 games of Mark Davis. I thought that Mark Davis was fine in Game 6. I didn't see any major factor there, major change there. Maybe you get a Tony Brothers Game 7. That'll be interesting. Tony Brothers, they haven't had a Zach Zarba game, I don't think. So it wouldn't surprise me if they get Zach Zarba. And then they got Ed Mole Game 5. They got Scott Foster Game 4. I don't think that they get either of those 2 guys, but who knows? They're going to want a veteran crew on this. So I'm going to guess that Tony Brothers and Zach Zarba are part of the ref crew in Game 7. Who knows? Maybe it matters. Maybe it doesn't. Can Jamal Murray dig deep? I already talked about that. He's going to have to find some level of impact If not, then they're going to have to change up his role a little bit. Like, he can't soak up all of those possessions that he soaked up in game 6. And a lot of it was early on where he just he took 10 shots, was 1 of 10, had a couple bad turnovers, just not necessarily playing like with the force and intensity that you need to. They're going to have to figure out pretty early if Murray can do that or not. And if he can't, then he's going to have to pick his spots a little bit better. And they're going to have to go to somebody else, whether that's Reggie in pick and roll, whether that's more Porter in DHO situations, whether they're using Murray as more of a screener and then Aaron Gordon gets free a little bit under the rim. That would be a pretty solid option. Yeah, we're going to have to see what Jamal Murray can do, because a lot of this is dictated by, can he handle that pressure? And if he can't, then they'll have to pivot. Which Nugget is going to make some threes? Would be nice if it was Michael Porter. If it's not Michael Porter, they might have to go small, and they might have to get him off the floor because his defense has not been good enough. That's a massive issue. And it's a problem that I think Nuggets fans sort of forgot existed. And I wasn't really considering that he would be a defensive liability, but he has been in the last 3 games. And then the last factor that's probably the most important of them all. Who's going to be the best player on the floor? Is it going to be Anthony Edwards like it was in game 6? Is it going to be Nikola Jokic like it was in game 5? I think Jokic and Edwards were basically tied for the best player on the floor in game 4, but the most important thing from that game was that Aaron Gordon was unbelievable in game 4. Game 3, I think Jokic was the best player on the floor in that one. Game 2, it didn't matter. The Nuggets were stuck under a buzzsaw or a bulldozer, if you will. And then game 1, I think Edwards was the best player on the floor. It's gone back and forth. Jokic has had that title a couple times. 2.5, I'll say. Edwards has had it 2.5 between games 1, 4, and 6. Who's going to be the best player on the floor in game 7? Is it going to be Jokic? Is it going to be Ant? Guess it's possible it could be Jamal. Maybe it's Rudy Gobert. Maybe it's Karl Anthony Towns. Maybe it's Aaron Gordon. Who's going to be the hero? Who's going to be the guy that you're going to remember as the one who saved or the one who just killed the Nuggets? If it's Jokic, Denver's going to have a great opportunity, obviously. And if it's Edwards, it's going to be an uphill battle, because often in these situations, the team with the best player wins the series. I think that Jokic is the best player in the world. I think he's proven that over and over and over again. But I think that Edwards, we're witnessing this in real time in these playoffs, has elevated his game to the level where he is in a new tier. He is not quite in Jokic's tier, but with the Nuggets not having the personnel needed in order to really match up with him, they are up a creek in trying to slow him down. So they're going to have to dig deep. They're going to have to find a way to make sure that he is not the best player on the floor. And this is funny from Nick Wilson. Cat going off like a 38-point triple-double to win it would ruin so many narratives. That would be so horrible. Can you imagine a worse way to lose? That would be painful. Knock on wood. But look, the way that Jokic was standing on the sidelines during the fourth quarter of game 6, he never sat down. He just watched. He looked like he was in a concerning amount of pain, but also that he was ruminating on how best he could win the next game. And you know that he's thinking about it. You know he's going to be mentally prepared. You know he's going to be physically prepared. And if he can put the team on his back, it alleviates the pressure from Murray. It alleviates the pressure from MPJ, where they don't have to be elite. They just have to be found. We'll see what happens. I'm very curious to see what they decide to do. I'm curious to see how this game is going to ultimately pan out. Game 6, it's horrible, disgusting, gross. Not where a champion needs to be. They have an opportunity, the Nuggets do, to wipe that slate clean in Game 7. And we'll have plenty of time to talk about how they can do that, either tomorrow or Sunday with Swipa. We'll see what happens. Everybody, that is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at Bet Online and number 38. Thank you so much for tuning into the show today. Really appreciate all the love and support on the podcast as always. Hit that like button, that subscribe button on the way out, and make sure to check out all of the things that we've got going on over at the Mile High Sports YouTube channel. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you guys very soon.